Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, since some of you may be new listeners, I thought I would go back in time to the days of my humble beginnings of my journey with real bread. But even if you've heard my story before, it's always good to hear the information again that set me on this path and forever changed my life and health. Many years ago, after graduation from high school, I set off to the University of Georgia as a pre-med student. I loved studying the human body and everything about the way it worked, and I had a passion to help people get well. In my mind, I wanted to save the world. But in just my very first year of college, I realized, however, that I really did not want to be in school as long as it would take me to become a doctor. And also, I really did not want that grueling a career after college. After changing my major and spending 1 quarter in pharmacy school, I discovered that also wasn't the path for me. I finally landed in food science. It was an up-and-coming industry at the time, and after graduation, I worked nearly 5 years as a bacteriologist for Kraft Foods. Through all these twists and turns, my passion for studying the human body and the way it worked never waned. I loved a good biochemistry book, and I loved studying the scientific works of those in the medical and healthcare field. My basic philosophy was if something isn't working in my body, then I must not be getting the nutrients I need for that particular issue. I admit, perhaps that might be a bit oversimplified, but I am still convinced that it's a very, very good starting point. I believe then and now in healthy eating and eating real food. I quit my job at Kraft Foods with the birth of my first child, and I became more committed than ever to a healthy lifestyle. My husband, Brad, and we had a huge garden. I prepared most of our food from scratch. I laugh and say I grew up in the South, so I learned to cook at a young age. Mealtime for me and our family was real meat, real homegrown vegetables, real butter, real fruit, and even, back then, homemade bread. Through my years of studying and reading, I would read of the demise of white flour and that whole wheat flour was healthier. But I never really understood or was told what made it healthier. But I tried my hand at baking our bread with the store-bought whole wheat flour that was readily available instead of white flour. But everything I baked with it always seemed dry, coarse, and pretty heavy unless I mixed it with some white flour. I finally just gave up on bread making with 100% whole wheat flour. I would still make from scratch our muffins and our pancakes, pizza dough, dinner rolls, adding a bit of whole wheat flour to the white flour I was using. But other than our bread, our diet was pretty well built on real food, much of it from our own garden. For the most part, our family was fairly healthy, but my kids still had their fair share of colds and ear infections and seemed to catch whatever bug was going around pretty regularly. And I, personally, had the common complaints of most Americans: constipation, chronic sinus congestion, frequent headaches, sometimes even migraines, and you know what? Just plain low energy. I would often blame my low energy on the 5 children that I now had and being a nursing mother as well as a homeschooling mom. But in 1991, my world changed forever, and I learned that my physical life didn't have to look or feel the way I was looking and feeling. Through a publication that is no longer in print, I was introduced to a healthy eating concept that radically changed my life and the health of our family. Through the information presented, I learned that whole grains are the most nutrient-dense food group that God has given us. They provide nearly all of the vital nutrients and fiber needed to sustain life and promote good health. But I also learned that only when whole grains are freshly milled do they retain all of these life-giving nutrients. I also learned that prior to the 1900s, most of the bread consumed in this country was made at home. Homes either had hand mills to mill their own flour, or communities were established and built up around the local miller where they could buy their flour freshly milled. I learned that real whole grain flour spoils, and to prevent spoilage, mills were invented to remove the bran and germ portions of the grain away, as well as the oils. And with this removal, most of the nutrients are lost. I learned that this commercially milled flour was then enriched due to the loss of nutrients, but that this enrichment was not a favor the food companies were doing for its consumers, but a replacement of a mere fraction of the nutrients lost when the bran and germ and oils are removed. I also learned that most of the common health complaints in America are directly related to the consumption of commercially processed flour products and its introduction to the American food market. The publication presented a brief history of the flour milling industry and then a short discussion of the common diseases that plague most Americans and how each are related to our consumption of this nutrient and fiber deficient commercially processed flour and bread products. The information I was reading made perfect sense to me, and I knew it was scientifically as well as biblically sound. I was convinced more than ever from this information that whole grain flour was the way to go. And I was surprised that with my background in food science and all my studies, I had not put all of these pieces of the puzzle together before. But this time, I was not only presented with all these facts about how nutritious whole wheat flour is, but I was also introduced to the idea and the ability to mill my own flour at home with a small in-home electric grain mill. This was definitely the piece of the puzzle I had been missing. With my newfound enthusiasm, my husband Brad bought me my first grain mill for my birthday in February of 1991, 35 years ago. From the very first day it arrived, I began making all of my own flour at home for all of our bread, muffins, pancakes, biscuits, cakes, and cookies, anything made from flour for my young family of 5 children. For me, in the first day alone, after consuming the most delicious bread I had ever made, I noticed a few significant health benefits. In the first 24 hours, my lifelong struggle with constipation was ended, never to return. Within a few days, I noticed increased energy, and I no longer needed or even wanted a nap just to function. By the end of the first month, my frequent headaches were gone, chronic sinus congestion gone, and my daily dependence on antihistamines just to breathe freely at night gone. And again, none have returned in all of these 35 years. I have not had an antihistamine of any kind since 1991, even if I do get a cold. This is a truly remarkable testimony since so many people, even children, need them regularly, if not daily. Then I began to notice that my children's frequent colds and other sicknesses became almost non-existent. And in the 25 years of raising now 9 children, only 2 doctor visits have been needed for an illness. If they did occasionally get sick, they recovered quickly on their own, the way God intended. I could hardly believe the vast difference this one change in our already healthy diet seemed to make in the health of our family. And for me, I needed to know how and why. Thus began my journey of an in-depth study of the vast nutrients supplied by whole grains and freshly milled flour and the role they play in meeting the physical needs of our body. I read anything and everything I could get my hands on. And I must say, it has been quite the eye-opening journey. Whole grains are indeed one of the most nutrient-dense food groups God has given us. Coupled with fruits and vegetables and some good sunshine, whole grains are pretty much life-sustaining. In my excitement from what I was learning, I began to share my bread with others. The next thing I know, they were calling me wanting more bread and sharing how they had more energy. They were no longer constipated or just simply felt better since eating this real bread. But the one testimony that really sent me on a discovery mission was the one from a phone call I received early one morning. Her first words were simply, "It's the bread, it's got to be the bread." She then went on to share how her blood cholesterol levels had dropped 85 points in the 1 month since she had started eating the bread I was making for her every day and at every meal. She was convinced it was the bread, as she had made no other dietary changes at the time. She also went on to say that she had been on multiple prescribed medications by multiple doctors to try to lower her cholesterol, to no avail. Hers was a testimony I had not studied. I had studied mine, but not this. So it fueled my passion to study even more. What was in this bread that could lower someone's cholesterol so drastically in such a short time? Through my research, I learned that cholesterol is an important nutritional component of every cell in our body, as well as a precursor of our sex hormones, as well as our steroid hormones, which are absolutely critical to most of our vital bodily functions. But without the nutrients to break it down, to get it out of our bloodstream and into our cells where it can do its job, it virtually gets stuck in our blood vessels, making high cholesterol levels a marker for significant health issues. But most importantly, I learned that every nutrient to break down cholesterol and get it out of our blood and to our cells to be used is found in whole grains and beans, but particularly wheat. Inositol, choline, vitamin B6, and most importantly, a phospholipid known as lecithin are all found abundantly in real whole grains and freshly milled wheat flour. From these testimonies, word soon spread about the amazing health benefits of real bread made from freshly milled flour, not to mention that the bread I was making was absolutely delicious. The next thing I know, I was making and selling bread out of my home and our tiny kitchen. But with the birth of our 6th child, I was quickly becoming overwhelmed. A few people began to ask about getting a grain mill for themselves and would I teach them how to make bread. These requests sparked an idea in my mind. One day in the fall of 1992, 34 years ago, after a long day of making bread for others, making bread for my family, homeschooling the children, and taking care of my own family's needs, I realized that making bread for others was not the best plan. I was tired and overwhelmed. And I know that God put these words and idea into my heart and mind. As my husband, Brad, arrived home from work that day, I met him in the driveway to present my thoughts to him. I said, I do not think I'm supposed to make bread for the world, but I am to teach the world to make bread for themselves. Bread Beckers was born that day in 1992 on our driveway of our small home where we have raised 9 children together. And now is 2026. My passion to teach others how to make bread from freshly milled flour and the amazing health benefits of whole grains has never been lost. In fact, I may be more passionate today than when I first started this journey 35 years ago. Our business grew from the testimony of others and my simple teachings. Our business, Bread Beckers, soon outgrew our home in 1998, and we incorporated with a longtime friend and partner. We moved into our current location in Woodstock, Georgia in 1999. Today, we occupy 23,000 square feet of space between 2 buildings. We have 10,000 square feet of retail space with a retail store, a studio classroom where we offer in-person and online classes, and we are one of the largest grain packaging facilities servicing more than 120 co-ops throughout the country. Over these past 34 years in business, we have seen countless lives changed for the better. It is absolutely exciting to me to hear so many testimonies of improved health and healing. And I continue to look for answers to discover why this one food, real bread, is so life-changing. In all my years of study and research, I have never seen or heard of one dietary change bringing such immediate and noticeable health benefits. And my message has not changed at all over these years. It remains the same. God intended bread to be the staff of life. Jesus compared himself to bread for a reason, because real bread made from freshly milled whole grains is life-giving and life-sustaining. It is simply too good not to share with others. A few years ago, I asked God to give me a word that fit my presentations about bread, but he gave me 2, hope and encouragement. As more and more people face significant health challenges these days with no real improvement, no matter what they try, they often lose hope and become very discouraged. It is my determination and goal, as I share the truth about wheat, whole grains, and real bread made from freshly milled flour, that you will find hope and become encouraged that God has heard your prayers and provided you with a nearly perfect food. Next week on Sue's Healthy Minutes, I will continue on this journey and share with you the fascinating history of flour milling and the information that opened my eyes to the world of real bread that changed my life forever. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Share it with a friend. And until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.